Hello viewers at home, welcome to yet another episode of Lunch Guide. I'm your host Chef Andy, and today we are going to be working on a very beautiful pork spare ribs dish. We're going to be pairing that with some homemade barbecue sauce, which I'll show you how to make on this very show. So just to start us off with the ingredients all the way at the front here, I've got some beef cube, I've got some curry powder, some fresh ginger, some bay leaves and some star anise. I've got some honey, I've got some coffee, some onions and some salt. I've got some parsley, some colored peppers there, some pineapple juice which we freshly squeezed, some lemons there, some ketchup, some nicely beautiful marinated pork spare ribs, and parsley again, some sesame seeds and a bit of black pepper. And on the side here I've got a nice beautiful pan there that's got a bit of oil which we're just going to be working with. So we're going to take a short commercial break, and when we come back we're going to go straight into how this basic dish is going to be prepared today. So see you in a little bit. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. We're just recapping on some of the ingredients which we're working with today, and for those who missed out, we're going to be making some beautiful barbecue homemade sauce. We're going to be working with some pork spare ribs, and we're going to be incorporating this into a dish that you can actually be able to have as a light lunch and even as a snack, maybe in your afternoon hours. So just to take you back to the ingredients, I'm working with some stock cubes, some curry powder, some ginger, some bay leaf and some star anise seed. I've got some honey, some coffee, some onions and some salt, some pineapple juice and some lemons there, some ketchup, a bit of parsley there and some colored peppers, and last but not least a bit of sesame seed. So I'll start us off on this end, and we're basically just going to fry these and give them a bit of a color. And then we're just going to start off after that by making a nice beautiful sauce to go with it, and I'll show you how to finish off the dish on the last segment of the show. So we're just going to give that a few seconds to heat up, and in the meantime we're just going to get our ingredients for the sauce going as well on a different pan on the side here. Alright, so in a bigger pan there, I'm just going to have the barbecue sauce going. So we are going to start by our ketchup. So that's all gonna go into the pan. And what we want to do is basically give that a bit of time to heat up. Remember, we're going to be incorporating some ingredients in there. So to that I'm going to add a bit of pineapple juice. And then we're just going to squeeze half a lemon in there as well. So remember to use a sieve. You don't want your seeds or the lemon to go in, or rather the pulp as well. Right, so that's going. So we let that continue on medium to low heat. We're just basically going to allow the ketchup to really infuse with the juices before we go in with any of the other seasonings. So to this side, we're just going to go in with our pork now. So remember, these have just been marinated and they've been sitting in the sauce overnight. We let them sit out a bit to just get them to room temperature, and now we're just going to fry them to give them a bit of color, and then we're going to take them out of the oil. So remember, the oil should not be too hot. You just want to cook them slowly. Right. I'm just gonna give my pan a bit of a shake just to make sure the oil is just about covering the top of the pork. So remember this, the pork is already a very much oily meat. It's definitely fatty. But this process is actually a very unique one because you actually get to cook it really slowly. You don't really allow all that oil to sit in there much after, because right after frying it, we're gonna throw it in the oven. We're gonna allow it to dry up a little bit to get a really nice crisp before we actually bring it back and turn it into our sauce and just coat it much later. So to the pan on the side here, I've got some ketchup and some pineapple juice that's been going now. So that's just going on low heat. Right, so to that we're just going to add some of the ingredients that are remaining here. So I'll just go in with a little more pineapple juice. And then we're gonna go in with also some parsley. I'm not even gonna chop it, it's gonna go in whole. And then just some wedged up peppers. Then I'm gonna go in also with a bit of basil leaves. Gonna go in with a bit of honey. And then some ginger. So everything basically goes in together and we just allow that to cook down slowly. And then sprinkle just about a tablespoon of coffee right on top of everything. And then we're gonna add our curry powder, just about half a teaspoon. Then we're gonna add some of those onions. So that's about 2 tablespoons chopped onion. And then just for the cube, we're gonna use just about a quarter of it, and we're just gonna crumble that right on top. And just to finish that off, just 2 pieces of star aniseed. And all you want to do is just give that a mix. Remember, you're going to allow this to cook really slowly, just to give you time to just get the pork to cook well. So I'm just going to mix that with my whisk here, and I'm just going to allow that to cook really, really slowly on low heat. All right, so we're just gonna give that some time to continue. And on this end, we're basically now just going to check on our pork, and I'm just gonna give that a turn and look at it on the other side. And as you can see, it's nicely starting to get a bit of color. Remember, you don't want them too crispy at this stage. So this I've been cooking on one side for about 4.5 minutes. So I'll turn them over and fry them on the other side for also about another 5 minutes. So remember, this is more of a blanching way. It's more of a slower process of cooking the pork in some oil. You are going to allow this to sit in the oven again for a little bit. So I always recommend also just preheat your oven at this stage. So in the oven here on the side, I've got a nice pan here that we had ready to go much earlier. And we're just going to set our timer for about 20 minutes at 200 degrees on both top and bottom element. So we're just gonna give that a bit of time to heat up. And in the meantime, we're just gonna keep mixing our sauce on the side here. Just make sure you keep mixing it to make sure it doesn't thicken too fast or start to burn on the sides. Right, and just to thin that off, just the remainder bit of your pineapple juice, remaining bit of your honey, just regular honey, and about another teaspoon of curry powder, just regular curry powder. We're just going to keep mixing that. Remember, this is going on low heat, so we're just gonna give that about another 4-5 minutes. And while that continues on low heat, we're gonna now switch back to our pork. Right, so this is just nicely coated on the sides. Remember, all we want to give it is a bit of that sticky effect on the edges and right on the top. And the beauty of cooking it before going into the oven, it actually allows it to dry up much slower, and it actually doesn't dry up too much to the bone. So all you have is basically a nice coating of meat around your bone that will just slide off the bone once you actually start to eat. And it shouldn't actually make a mess when you're trying to really pull that meat from the bone. All right, so these are just about okay now. So what we're going to do now is we're going to take this out of the oil, and we're just going to let that sit on some parchment paper. So we're just going to use a little piece of that. Right, so I'm just using parchment paper to allow it to just grease off a little faster. You can also use some kitchen towel, or you can leave it on a rack. So I'm just going to take those off. Remember to also turn off your heat at this point in time, just to give your oil some time to also cool down. Alright, so if you're going to be making this, I also recommend that always have a bit of remorse with your oil as well. Remember, if you were thinking of refrying something in this oil, it might not be able to be used for the same purpose. But if you're going to be making this regularly, I would recommend you could always just strain your oil once it's cooled off, and you can actually reserve it for frying pork every time you do it in the future. So now our sauce is just about thick enough now. So we're gonna turn that off as well. And basically what we're gonna do with that is we're gonna strain it. So I'm just going to put that through a strainer on the side here. Alright, so remember the chunky vegetables, we threw them in chunky because we need to strain them out. Remember, we only want a bit of flavor in the barbecue sauce. So we're basically just going to pour that whole mixture into a sieve here. Right, and all you want to do is just use a wooden spoon or your whisk to just work through the veggies and all the chunks that are in there. This is just to basically to try and get as much sauce out of the sieve as you can. Remember, you don't want to waste your sauce as well. Right, so the veggies might be mushy, but please don't try and force them right through the sieve. Remember, you're only looking for an aromatic sauce. You're not really looking for any chunks of vegetable or any pieces of raw spice in there. You only want just the flavor. All right. And always just remember to go also under your sieve just to make sure there is not any of the excess. All right, so we're just gonna give that a bit of time to cool off on the side here. And now all we are going to do now is we're gonna finish off our pork in the oven. And I always recommend this particular technique when you're doing so. All I do is I actually leave the rack inside the oven to heat up a little bit. This is to make sure it doesn't stick to the meat. Right, and all we are going to do now is arrange the pieces of spare ribs on the rack. You can hear it, it's nice and sizzling hot. So this we're just going to allow to sit in the oven at about 200 for about 8 to 10 minutes, just to get them to really get that crispy covering on the top. And once the skin is now nice and crispy, we're just going to take it out and we're going to run it through some of that sauce in a hot pan, and we'll be ready to serve. All right, so now that's nice and ready to go in. Just going to switch my glove there. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to slide first the rack right in the middle there, if you can be able to see from the cameras. And then I'm going to have another pan right underneath it. So basically this is just to trap the excess oil that drips from the pork. So we're gonna set that for about 10 to 15 minutes at 200 degrees. And when we come back, we're gonna check it out and see what it looks like. We're going to jump into a small commercial break, and when we come back, we're going to take out the pork, we're going to have a look at it, and we're going to just finish it off with the sauce as I mentioned earlier. So don't touch that dial, we'll see you in a short bit. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. For those who missed out on what we were doing just before the break, we were actually just grilling some of that pork in the oven, which we're about to take out now. So this is now cooked, this is done. So we're just going to pull that rack out. And we're just going to move them onto our board here. So these have been in the oven now for about 20 minutes on low heat. So we started the oven off by basically hiking the temperature up to 200. And as soon as the pork went in there, we allowed it to now come down to about 120, and it went continuously for 20 minutes. So now these are nice and crispy. Now all we need to do is finish this off in a barbecue sauce that we actually were making earlier. So I've just strained this and reheated it. And now all we are going to do is add all our pork in there and just toss them around. Right, so we can actually turn off the heat. So all we are going to do now is toss them around that sauce just to give them a bit of a coat. And actually we're going to be serving it in a nicely created plate that we thought of earlier. So basically we're going to be serving it in this shelled pineapple. So basically the idea here was basically to show you a technique of how to play around with a plating technique with an ingredient that is incorporated in your dish. And this pairs really well because what we did is we took the hollows out, we squeezed those and turned them into the juice that made the sauce, and now we're using the hollow remainder that we're actually going to play with now for our plating. So I'm just going to finish tossing these. Right, nice generous toss right around. And now all we are going to do is transfer those to our beautiful plate here. So remember, this is just one of the many ways to be creative with some ingredients that you're working with. I wanted to show you this in particular because sometimes you may actually be throwing a party or you're looking at someone to impress and you might not have the ideas to do it, but this is a perfect way of not ruining your ingredient and actually not wasting it and actually using it to incorporate it into a dish that you're making later. So I'm just going to scoop some of that remaining sauce. All I'm going to do is place that on the plate. Right. And last but not least, we're just going to finish it off by garnishing it with a bit of chopped parsley and some sesame seeds. So these are things you can also avoid when plating if you're not accustomed to using them, or if you're not particularly a fan of using parsley or eating parsley, you can avoid this part. So as I said, this is just for the visual. Right, so just a bit of chopped parsley. And last but not least, just a bit of sesame seeds all around your plate like that. Right, so this is now ready to serve. And as I mentioned earlier, this comes really handy if you're looking for a snack or something to just impress your guests, or something you can have as a light snack even on a weekend. Just finish that off with a bit of pepper. Right, and now this is now perfectly good to serve. As I mentioned earlier, definitely a simple dish you can be able to play around with. You can even actually make that just for the kids as an appetizer, and it actually accompanies every single party setting really, really well. So from my end at the studios, it's been a pleasure being with you today. You've been tuned into Lunch Guide on BrandPlus TV, and your host has been Chef Andy. Until the next time, have a lovely evening.